Hello, everybody. It's Nora Peevy as myself today. Just Nora, but still got kitty ears on because gotta be fancy when you're online. And gold eyeshadow. Wow. Yeah, I really did it up today because I am hyping up my newest book, Cemetery Tacos and Other Delights by Nora B. Peevy, that is out from Trepidatio. You can buy it online at Amazon. And this is my baby, my heart. I have been working on this book and I didn't know it since 2008. I've just been writing short stories and collecting them and saving them. Haven't been finding the right spots to submit them to, or if I did submit them to a place, they got rejected. So I just put them in my save pile. And then all of a sudden I realized that I had a collection of short stories that I could put together, which it is not horror. It is really not splatterpunk. It kind of falls into the category of weird fiction or bizarro fiction, which is why Journalstone Trepidatio published it under their Trepidatio label, which used to be used more for bizarro fiction. Now, I'm not saying my stories are bizarre, but I mean, I do have talking alien ants. There are talking alien cows. There is a murder hornet man. There is a moth girl. But there's also other things. There are paranormal ghost stories in here, and it is a really interesting collection. And I thought I would share one of my stories from it today with you. So what I'm going to do is read from Cemetery Tacos and Other Delights, the story Down to the Water's Edge. You might want to get some Kleenex ready for this one. Plainfield, Wisconsin is home to 899 poor souls lost in the middle of marsh and farming country. It's also home to the infamous body snatcher and murderer Ed Gein. Though if you travel to Plainfield Cemetery, you'll be hard-pressed to find his tombstone. The locals gave up replacing that bit of gruesome history years ago, and poor Ed lies for all eternity in an unmarked grave if he's even in that grave. The wind tousles my long black tresses into fashionable mermaid knots as I tap the side of my red Toyota Tacoma to the beat of the Cure. Excuse me, allergies are bugging my voice today. Up around the bend, the lake winked into view. I slowed down. I stepped out of my dusty truck and adjusted the wide brim of my black sun hat, looking rather striking in my loose black dress, though not a soul was there to witness my entrance into Podunkville. The silver ripples on Long Lake and the humble white Cape Cod with a broad limestone stairway leading to the shore were reminiscent of my favorite Milwaukee beach. This was not the big city, though. I dropped my luggage on the ground and stretched, inhaling, raising my fingertips to the dusky sky. A raft of ducks took off from the reeds in a flutter of feathers and quacking. The imposing pines summoned the tiny white house, holding the 2-story Cape Cod prisoner beneath their stalwart branches. I lowered my large black sunglasses as I approached the front porch, crunching pine needles beneath my boots, and worried the key on the shoestring around my neck as I shuddered and shouldered my luggage and laptop and clamped up the uneven wooden steps. They were in need of painting like everything else around here. Cleaning a dirty window with the sleeve of my dress, I peeked inside. Downstairs was a plain wood table with 4 chairs off to the left, a behemoth of a plaid sofa in front of the fireplace in the center of the room, and a rocking chair next to one of the windows overlooking Long Lake. I'd only found out about my great-aunt's death last week, but here I was, ready to scare up some ghosts. It was nearing Samhain. Maybe I could invite Dina and Rainey up next week. We could have a rousing seance in the October cold. Thankfully, The estate appraiser mentioned a half cord of firewood stored on the west side of the house. I prayed to the goddess of rodents that all the mice had left the premises, Mary, and never to meet her again. I entered the shadowy house, dropped my stuff beside the couch, and went exploring for a light switch. Lucky me, I hit my shin on a table as I passed the couch. Goddess, damn it! The lamp fell off the table, and the shattering of glass almost made me cry. I hoped it wasn't a pretty lamp. In the waning rectangle of light from the open front door, I managed to find the light switch, reveling in the glory of industrial light for about 2 seconds before I heard a tiny fizzle, then a pop, then smelled burnt wiring. I needed to get an electrician out here on Monday. Unfortunately, it was only Friday night. Now I was hoping Great Aunt Tilly, called Tilly by everyone that knew her, was a practical lady and kept candles and matches someplace downstairs. The logical place to look was the fireplace mantel, which is where I found a useful collection of vintage bedchamber candlestick holders, an unused box of plain tapers, a box of strike anywhere matches, and a kerosene lantern half filled. Thank the goddess. Now I could get a good fire going, which I assumed would be the only heat in the little Cape Cod. I struck a match and lit the kerosene lamp to investigate upstairs. The stairs creaked as old stairs do, but I didn't mind. The house was talking to me. I was become acquainted with my new friend and imagined many hours spent writing and hiking and taking photographs. After the past year recovering from a breakup with my narcissistic girlfriend, I relished isolation and adventure. I'd never been always a renter with a roommate or lover, never staying in the place too long. At the top of the landing, I paused to look out the window, admiring the original glass with the warps and bubbles. Well, I had a few of those too, so we'd get along fine, this old house and me. It spoke to my soul. I lifted the kerosene candle to the darkened window. The thick pine trees obscured my view. I'd go exploring tomorrow. Great Aunt Tilly's bedroom was down a short, efficient hallway to the left. The furnishing was simple, a double bed covered in a homemade quilt, a missionary-style wardrobe, and a cedar chest at the foot of the bed that could hold extra blankets and linens. The air was musty. I would open windows tomorrow to remedy this, but I could tolerate it for one night. Hand-tied red rugs lay on the white painted wood floor, and I was grateful for them as I slipped out of my shoes and settled on the bed, which blessedly did not creak like so many things in Great Aunt Tilly's home. I turned off the kerosene lamp, too tired to care about undressing or starting a fire in the fireplace, and slipped under the quilt. The linen smelled faintly of rose water. I drifted off to sleep, listening to the house settling around me. The last sound I heard before closing my eyes was a lone owl in the pines. I wore a plain white nightgown with a boxy neckline. My brow was feverish. My sweat smelled sour. A brown bottle of morphine sat on the nightstand. The bedroom walls were a hideous shade of green, somewhere between calf shit green and vomit chartreuse. My throat felt swollen shut. Large, painful canker sores covered my tongue and the roof of my mouth. I tasted salt and coughed blood into a white handkerchief. A pretty rosy-cheeked girl in a white button-down blouse and pants was reading The Angel of Ghosts by Edgar Wallace beside my bed. Fanny Bryce crooned My Man over the tombstone-style crystal radio. Beads of moisture collected on the nutshell of on the outside of a full pitcher of water. So cold, but I couldn't drink anything. My clammy pillow stuck to my unruly chin-length bob. I held my hand to my burning, swollen jaw and opened my mouth to speak, but instead began another coughing fit. This time I ended up with a bloody molar in my hand. I woke with the beast of a headache, grinding my teeth, my fists clenched and my brow moist, though the air in the room was rather chilly. The left side of my face felt hot and swollen like I had an impacted tooth. I lit the kerosene lamp and saw a spot of blood on the embroidered pillowcase. I padded my stocking feet to the wardrobe where a full-length mirror hung inside and patted my face. The excruciating pain disappeared immediately, which alarmed me. My cheeks were pale, not swollen and flushed. I still had all my teeth. Odd. I crawled back under the quilt, leaving the kerosene lamp burning to chase away my nightmare. There was no blood on my pillowcase either. I checked. My eyelids grew heavy again. I don't know how long I was asleep. The second time when I woke to the ticking of an old-fashioned alarm clock, I sat up in bed and listened for the direction it was coming from, which was by the window overlooking Long Lake. Strange, because there was no clock over there, but I got out of bed to investigate. A very faint glow emanated through the cracks in the floorboards. Thumping my hands along the boards, I discovered one board was looser than the others and managed to pry it up. I shone the kerosene lamp inside the secret compartment and discovered an alarm clock radiating a green glow from the face. I lifted it out. It was quite heavy and vintage. I wondered why it was tucked away beneath the floorboards. And that's when I caught a flash of white out of the corner of my eye. I pulled the heavy packet of letters addressed to Tilly from Frankie. The thick bundle was dog-eared and tied with a wide, gross-grain ribbon of dusty peach. I set the alarm clock and the bundle of letters on the bedside table and crawled back into bed. The air was so chilly I could see my breath, and I remembered I hadn't started the fireplace. Damn. The ticking of the alarm clock punctuated the silence, and I tossed and turned the rest of the night. It had stopped. I yawned and reached to wind the clock. I woke up with the weak morning light of autumn streaming through the window and made a mental note to add blackout curtains to my list of shopping items. I can't read today. Sorry, guys. The clock appeared to have sprung a spring in the middle of the night, which was a shame since it was so beautiful. I discovered an engraving on the back, counting the minutes. I went downstairs and brought my bags up, rummaged around for my toiletries, and then remembered there was no electricity, which probably meant no water because she had a well. Damn. I opted for my favorite black leggings and an oversized chunky knit sweater, chewing a bit of toothpaste and spitting it into a tissue. Gross. Not wanting to bother with my hair, I found a pair of chopsticks and fashioned a loose and messy bun. By then my stomach was grumbling, so I Googled mom and pop diners and found Misty's menu, which looked from the online reviews like they had the perfect comfort food and cheap diner coffee I adored. Grabbing the bundle of letters, I decided to walk to breakfast, since it was a nice sunny morning. Misty's menu was a little hole-in-the-wall diner painted forest green, with lots of dead animal heads staring at me while I read the letters. After 5 cups of coffee, it was about to... On the way to the John, I bumped into the waitress. "Excuse me." She performed an expert waitress weave around me in the narrow hallway, snapping her gum. I looked at her name tag on the drab brown uniform. "Cindy, is there a historical society for the town nearby? I just inherited my Green Aunt Tilly's place, and I'd like to find out more about the area." "Oh, the Marsh place. Everyone loved Tilly Marsh. She was a sweetheart." "Of course we have a historical society. Though if you ask me, they're pretty stuffy. All members of the DAR. I looked bewildered. "Daughters of the American Revolution. You're not from around here, I can tell. It's okay." She continued gabbing the small town manner that small towners do, but Eventually, she got to the directions. Turn right out of the parking lot and then left at the barn with the smiley face. It'll be on the left side of the road next to the candy store with the giant bear out front. Ask for Pearl or May. They're the small town keepers of everything. You have a blessed day now. Right. Left at the barn next to the big bear. I smiled and thanked her. After using the John, which boasted it was the world's largest taxidermy bathroom in the Guinness Book of World Records, I headed toward the destination. I found the bear, but didn't win a prize from his congenialities. I yelled and flapped my arms at a rafter of turkeys, moseying down the middle of the road like it was a lazy Sunday afternoon. I walked into the store at the tiny strip mall. It smelled of coffee and sugar cookies. Pictures of the town from 100 years back plastered every inch of wall not dedicated to the dark and solemn bookcases moping in their musty paper scent. I didn't blame them. The stagnant store could use some pops of color, a few potted plants, and a good smudging. The floorboards sighed as I rang the shiny bell at the front desk. Two thick women popped their heads from the back room. One piebald lady wore a patchworked prairie dress, and the other younger one wore sensible slacks and a navy floral print blouse. Can we help you? They asked. Okay, that's not creepy. I shifted my message bag on my shoulder. I was looking for some information on the old Tully Marsh place. Ah, the lady in the prairie dress adjusted her large square glasses. You must be Tilly Marsh's great niece. Word travels fast in a small town, the older woman complained as she looked at my surprised smile. Yes, I'm shabby. I recently inherited the place, and I found these letters under a floorboard in the bedroom. I pulled the bundle out of my bag, placing them on the counter. Oddly, I felt them shift in my hands. I slid them across the counter. Ah, the one in the glasses nodded. The Frankie letters. That's a sad story. She glanced at her friend Pearl. I'll put on some tea. Would you like some? None for me, thank you. I just came from the diner. Thank you, May. Have a seat, Shabby. Pearl gestured to a sitting area with 3 overstuffed green chairs. She took a cracked leather photo album from a bookcase nearing the pages and turned to pause at a picture of a pretty young brunette with a wavy flapper hairstyle hidden by a hat and a print dress. A tall, skinny blonde woman with a short page voice smiled next to her, her eyes burning with conviction. She wore knickers, well-worn leather boots, and a button-down shirt, unusual for the time. Pearl set her own teacup down when she came back with a tray of black English tea and peach tea. She poured a cup for May. Thank you, May. Frankie, Pearl pointed to the town boy, was best friends with Tilly. Tilly's parents owned a farm not far from the Mercedes, and the girls were thick as thieves. One day, Tilly's brother caught the two of them kissing and holding hands in the hayloft. As you can imagine, being like that back then was not accepted. Tilly was engaged to Chester, one of the farm hands, but her heart had always belonged to Frankie from the time they both could walk. Tilly and Frankie had planned on running away together before Tilly's wedding in May and riding the rails until they found a place that felt like home. Pearl paused to sip her tea. The peach steam wafting through the air reminded me of the peach gross-grain ribbon binding the letters. I could feel the ghost of a girl's kiss on my lips. May continued the story. Chester and the boys, including Tilly's brother, decided to teach the two girls a lesson. Tilly's brother held her down while Chester had his way with his future bride. Frankie was forced to watch, held in check by 2 of the other farmhands. She cursed and fought and screamed as Tilly's shrieks rose to the rafters, but Frankie wasn't able to break free. Folks said when Chester was done with Tilly, he spat in her face and told her to put a dress on and go home. He said that she was his, and no bull dyke would ever touch her again. You best remember that, Tilly, folks quoted, Chester screaming at her backside as she stumbled home shoeless, blinded by tears, her hair in knots, and snot running down her face. Then the boys turned on Frankie, May said quietly, not able to meet my gaze as a single tear burned in the corner of my left eye. They forced Frankie to perform fellatio on all of them while they watched and jeered. Said once she learned what a dick tasted like, she'd never want a woman's. May blushed and paused. Pussy. Then she'd never want a woman at all. Then they beat her up and ran her out of town. Destitute and with no relatives wishing to take her in, Frankie rode the rails for a while until she healed. Then she passed herself off as a young man and went off to fight in World War I in Europe. She wrote to Tilly every day she was overseas, not knowing Tilly was pregnant with Chester's baby. Chester refused to marry Tilly because she wasn't a virgin, no matter that it was he who got her pregnant. Tilly's father, Billy, got her a job as one of them radium girls, painting clock and watch dials that glowed in the dark, but he said after the baby was born, he wanted nothing to do with her or it, and she would have to find another place to live. Tilly's mother was heartbroken. She died shortly after Frankie was run out of town, and some say it was Frankie's dalliance that killed her. Heartsick too and pregnant with no prospects of marriage or any place to go, Tilly worked at the radium factory for the war effort until she took ill a few months later. Pearl interrupted. You see, the radium paint made the girls sick. They were instructed to lick the tips of their paint brushes to keep a fine point. The paint ingested from the brushes caused horrible growths, ulcers of the mouth, tongue, and throat. The girls' teeth rotted and fell out. Their jawbones ached and weakened, eventually falling apart. They couldn't eat and suffered excruciating pain until death. When Tilly realized she was poisoned, she was only a few months pregnant. One night she got up and walked out of the house, down the steps, and into the lake to take her last breath. She's often seen by young women in her white nightgown walking down to the water's edge. The locals call her the woman in white. I found an alarm clock upstairs, I said. Yes, May nodded. She was saving that clock for her baby's birth. It was all she had to give him or her. That morning, Tilly's brother and father found her floating, arms outstretched, staring skyward, her white nightgown spread like a sail around her, her lips blue and a smile on her face. Her brother Billy kept that clock on the mantel from then on. He was so ashamed he hadn't saved his baby girl. He never spoke her name again until the day he died, 20 years to the day Tilly took her own life. Some say the last word old Billy uttered was Tilly, and then he smiled and took his last breath. Your family bought the house after his death. And what happened to Frankie? I shifted in my chair. No one knows, Pearl shook her head. Some say she took her own life when she learned of Tilly's passing. Some say she rode the rails for a few years until she settled in Kansas after the war, but she never came back home again. I slipped the letters back into my messenger bag and stood. Thank you. I didn't know what else to say. Melancholy wrapped itself around me like a solemn cloak. I walked back to the house silent, my hands curled in fists so tight my knuckles hurt. I took the chair from in front of the window and carried it down to the lake, sitting there with the letters in my lap, fingering the wide grosgrain ribbon until dusk painted the sky lavender blue and a lone mourning dove cried out from the pines. Then I took the chair back inside and ate a cold dinner of canned beans by the light of the kerosene lantern, and went up the creaky stairs to bed. Shadows flickered and died as I extinguished the lantern's flame and slipped beneath Great Aunt Tilly's quilt. I tossed and turned for a while, listening to the house breathing around me until I finally fell asleep. Sometime later I awoke, cold. Shabby, a woman sighed. The clock, it was ticking. The house pointed to 3, the hours, the numerals glowing phosphorescent in the dark. I shot about a bed. Was I alone? I took the clock with my hands and felt it. Felt the numbers stir like letters. Strange. I walked downstairs, out the white wooden door in time to the ticking of the clock, barefoot in my Ramon shirt, and down the paint-peeling steps to the rough limestone stairs leading down to the water's edge. The stones were ice cold. The clock warm in my hands. I saw Tilly at the water's edge, the woman in white, her pregnant body curved and beautiful, her white nightgown plastered to her fair skin, water streaming from her dark hair. She smiled and beckoned to me, one hand on her belly. "Shabby," she whispered. I felt no fear as I approached her, only a mother's love. "Tilly." I was crying. She reached for the clock and cradled it like a newborn in the crook of her arm. With her other hand, her fingertips traced the tear tracks on my cheeks, leaving behind a warm golden flush that radiated through my body. She turned away from me then, still cradling the clock in one arm, her other arm curled around her belly as she stepped out into the lake. And with one last look back at me, she sank beneath the black water. The wind stirred in the pines, and Tilly's loving voice whispered, "Thank you," on the evening breeze. The mourning dove cried again, and I shivered as I turned back towards the house and my bed. On Monday, I would call for an electrician. On Monday, the electrician came. "I'll just take a look in the basement and see what I think I can find. These old houses usually have wiring needing replacing. That's something you'll have to put on your list of things to do." The electrician clomped downstairs. As he did, he thought he saw something glowing phosphorescent in the dark. He walked toward it with his flashlight. It was an old diary, so old the ink had faded to reddish brown. He opened it out of curiosity and then felt guilty. So he brought it upstairs, shabby. "Miss, I found this diary in the basement on the floor." "Well, thank you. This was my Aunt Tilly's house, and I haven't had time to explore everything because the electricity was out." She took the diary from him. The leather was so cracked and so old. Some flaked away. The cursive inside was so perfect, not messy like hers. She took it to the rocking chair, which seemed a fitting place to read, and as she did, the familiar ticking of the clock started. But how could that be? Her aunt had taken that into the lake with her. Shabby read, "My darling baby, Long Lake is the perfect place for a daughter to grow up. I know you're a daughter because I can feel you crying in my bones for the shame only a woman can feel for what happened to me that day with Chester and his friends, and for my eternal love, Frankie. She will be so happy to meet you, my little sweet pea. If anyone ever finds this book, they will know how much I adore you too. This world is not for us. We're going to go meet Frankie on the other side. In my heart of hearts, I feel her beckoning to me. Somewhere on the rails, I know she passed, and I long to feel her touch again. The three of us will have a wonderful life. Whoever is reading this, don't cry for me. My life is about to begin, and I won't be in pain anymore. My daughter Willow, as I've named her, which means grace and elegance, and Franklin and I will be a family, a real family, as God intended us to be. Love, Emily. Tilly." And that story always touches me every time I read it because back then, it is true that there were the Radium Girls during the war. And yes, what happened was true. They did instruct the Radium Girls to lick the tips of their brushes so that the points would be fine when they were making clocks and watches for the men that went to war. And yes, those women ended up getting cancer of the mouth, and they died extremely horrible, painful deaths. And it is something that is covered up in history, and it is not talked about much, about the suffering and the pain that a lot of women gave to that world war. And it's also covered up a lot about the suffering and the pain of how much women loved each other back then and how they couldn't have families and they couldn't be together because it was considered to be something that was heinous and against God's law, when really it's just another type of love, and it's beautiful and it should be celebrated. It's always been a fight that people have had, no matter what world they live in, that people of the same sex cannot be together and cannot be married and they can't have children. I thought it was getting a little better in America, but it seems like we're slipping backwards instead of going forwards in the Trump era. So if you're watching this and you feel like I do, that love is love and people are people and family are family, I hope you do everything that you can in your power to make sure that love is love and people are people and family are family, because it's important. Everyone deserves to be happy. And if you enjoy this story, even though it's one of the more melancholy ones, there are a lot of really happy and bright and goofy and silly ones in Cemetery Tacos and Other Delights by Nora B. Peevy. And you can find it in Kindle and also in paperback on Amazon.com. And if you stayed with me through this whole story, I really appreciate your audience and the time that you took to listen to me. And I hope that you have a wonderful and very bright and loving day, or a wonderful and very bright and loving evening wherever you are. Thank you very much. This is Nora B. Peevy signing off from The Demon Stole My Pencil.